Hello, I'm Brian Rountree, Corporate Safety Director with the Haskell Company, and today we're going to talk about mobile equipment spotter training. The content contained within is provided to establish ownership in the shared responsibilities in creating the safest work environment free of recognized hazards and reduction in the potential for incident. The intent of the content within is to promote safety awareness within the construction industry. This content is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to offer legal advice and is not intended to encompass all potential safety concerns, required training, or take the place of any or all jurisdictional requirements by OSHA or other local, state, federal regulations, or your employer where more stringent requirements may reside. It's dangerous to assume using a spotter makes equipment movement safer. Several victims of struck by and caught between incidents have been the equipment spotter. On November 20, 2001, at approximately 7:30 a.m., a 59-year-old male received blunt force trauma to both legs and left arm when he was backed over by a front-end loader. The operator of the loader had 17 years of experience. The victim remained hospitalized until he died from his injuries 38 days later on December 28, 2001. The victim was the spotter. The point of this slide is to ensure that the typical notion of assigning spotter duties to the newest or least experienced laborer is dangerous and irresponsible. Spotting equipment is a demeaning task? No, it's not. It's an important task that helps prevent accidents and fatalities. Spotters must be experienced and knowledgeable in order to maintain a safe working environment. What is a spotter? Someone trained to monitor mobile equipment movement and maintain immediate lines of communication with the equipment operator. Possesses knowledge and experience with construction and/or the area. Understands typical hazards of specific construction mobile equipment and knows basic hand signals to both guide and communicate with the mobile equipment operators. Where to use spotters? Spotters are required for the protection of workers, materials, structures, and equipment when a driver or operator does not have a full view of the intended path of travel. An operator is moving in an area where other workers and/or personnel are in the immediate vicinity. Maneuvering with limited visibility or space. In high traffic areas. Operating near overhead power lines. And when physical hazards are present.
So we have an understanding that the use of spotters is advantageous to the safe execution of work with heavy equipment. Are they used at all times? Not necessarily. But here are some common scenarios encountered on construction sites when spotters should be used. Spotters should be utilized when navigating with materials, working in tight or congested areas to assist in monitoring the operator's blind spots, working around overhead utilities or structures, excavating around buried facilities, and on sites congested with heavy traffic and/or ground personnel. While every construction site will present different scenarios, it's important to recognize the site-specific hazards and identify when the use of a spotter will help eliminate or control those hazards.
Spotter responsibilities. They shall be uniquely identified, protect themselves, dedicated to the task and have no other duties. Only task is to spot the equipment moving, prevent, reduce the potential for accidents and injuries, stay constantly aware of surroundings and changing conditions, prevention of equipment contact with personnel, machinery, property, and other equipment, maintain clear, effective communication with equipment operator and all personnel in the immediate area.
So does just having a spotter make things safe? No, not really. A spotter contributes to a safe work site only if they are properly trained and understand their function. They must recognize the equipment requirements and limitations and be able to give clear direction to operators. Not everyone can be an effective spotter, and recognizing some of the requirements needed is essential in selecting the right person to do the job. A spotter needs to possess the following skills. Must have a strong understanding of the task, good vision and be able to judge distances with accuracy, clearly understand all communication protocols, including signals to be used to direct equipment operators, be fit for duty, including the strength and ability to stand for longer periods of time, and may need to be able to walk significant distances, They must remain diligent and alert in recognizing changing conditions and hazards. Understand the need for and maintain the care and appropriate personal protective equipment needed for the job. Possess a responsible attitude in maintaining a safe work environment for themselves, the operator, and their worksite. Employers need to recognize these requirements, and workers tasked with spotting duties need to demonstrate these skills. The wrong person tasked to spot equipment can result in significant damage, injury, or even death.
Spotters must understand how the mobile equipment works and how it moves, understand the equipment limitations, its range, reach, and working radius, recognize ground and surface conditions and hazards such as holes, drop-offs, slopes, recognize overhead hazards such as pipelines, power lines, structural members.
We've identified the requirements and expectations needed of a suitable spotter. However, before any work can begin, a hazard assessment must be conducted. This process must include all personnel involved in the task at hand and is required to be reevaluated and updated as the task or day progresses. While every task and site will pose their own hazards, some general hazards to consider as it pertains to the spotter's role can be applicable in all operations. Consider ground conditions. Is it smooth and dry, or is it slippery and uneven? Is there a slip or trip potential for the spotter? Do the ground conditions present a potential rollover concern for equipment? What about hazards above? Are there overhead power lines, structures, or work areas present where the spotter or equipment will be working? Are there buried utilities in the area, and have these been identified and marked? If spotting equipment during excavation work, all utilities must be located and positively identified. Are adequate ground disturbance clearances being maintained, and do you know what the clearances for mechanical excavation are? Is the work area congested, or does it present restricted movement for the equipment? With pivoting equipment such as excavators, how much room does the equipment have to operate considering their swing radius? Are other workers in the area of the mobile equipment? What are the blind spots of the particular equipment, and what are the safe positions for the spotter to be to both direct the operator and stay clear of blind spots or pinch points? Is the spotter positioning safe in the event of operator error, mechanical failure, or equipment upset? Does everyone involved fully understand the communication protocols or signals to be used and the method of communication established? Are two-way radios to be used in combination with visual signals, or are the spotter and operator relying solely upon visual communication and signals? These are some of the most common and critical questions to consider when completing your hazard assessment. You will never control a hazard that you do not identify.
Blind spots and hazards. What is a blind spot? A blind spot is the area around a vehicle or piece of construction mobile equipment that is not visible to the operator, either by direct line of sight or indirectly by the use of internal and external mirrors. Equipment with enclosed cabs create large blind spots for the operator. The bigger the equipment, the larger the blind spots or hazardous areas for pedestrians and ground workers. What are the hazards? Running over or striking pedestrians. Running over or striking site materials and tools. Striking other equipment or vehicles. Roll over on steep slopes. In contact with utilities and power lines. Equipment operating hazards. This slide depicts several hazards when working around operating equipment. Remember, if you can touch it, you're too close. Stay out of blind spots. Stay away from rotating machinery outside of their swing radius or in their travel path. Never approach a piece of equipment without the knowledge of the operator, and make sure non-essential workers are out of the area.
It's possible that one of the most critical controls to consider after assessing the hazards begins with spotter positioning. By ensuring the spotter is clear of blind spots, in constant visual contact with the operator, and on the best ground conditions available, the hazards for personal harm to the spotter can be greatly reduced. This position must always provide a safe emergency route for the spotter in the event of equipment upset, mechanical failure, or operator error. It's also critical to ensure the spotter is clearly visible to the operator both in their line of sight and clearly identified with the use of Class II high visibility vest and possibly arm gauntlets. General positioning should always adhere to the following practices. Never stand directly in front of or directly behind any equipment. Always avoid pinch or crush points. When hoisting materials or equipment, never walk or stand underneath a load under any circumstance. Stay clear of equipment blind spots. If you can't see the operator, they can't see you. Ensure footing is stable and don't stand in positions or on ground that possess slipping hazards or presents potential to collapse, such as at the edge of an excavation. When possible, position yourself in an area that minimizes movement. This reduces the likelihood of slips and trips and also helps the operator know where you are at all times. If an operator ever loses sight of the spotter, they must immediately cease operation and re-establish line of sight with the spotter.
Operator responsibilities. Ensure the spotter understands the equipment travel path and the hazards. Maintain clear, effective communication with the designated spotter. Do not move without the attention of the spotter. Immediately cease all movements if the spotter isn't visible. Stop if you cannot see the spotter. Ensure the spotter understands maneuvering limitations of the equipment. Stay constantly aware of surroundings and changing conditions. Prevent equipment contact with personnel, machinery, property, and other equipment.
We've spent a lot of time discussing the spotter, their requirements, and the need to communicate well with operators. But safe spotting operations also require a lot from the operator. In order for an operator to work safely with the spotter, they need to follow some guidelines as well. While mandatory in all situations, operators need to ensure mirrors, windows, and visual aids such as backup cameras are clean and clear of dirt, mud, and in cold weather, defrosted. They need to follow the spotter's direction and ensure the spotter is in the correct location to monitor active blind spots at all times. If communication, signals, or directions are unclear, it is the operator's responsibility to stop the equipment to clarify or reassess the situation. They must not operate the equipment independently or disregard their spotter. If they are to lose visual contact with their spotter, they are required to stop operations and re-establish visual contact. Operators must always operate their equipment at a safe and appropriate speed, regardless of whether or not they are working with a spotter.
Operator and spotter responsibilities. Understand the task. The operator and spotter will discuss, understand, and agree what the operator is doing, where they're going, the route, where the spotter will be located, signals to be used, and emergency stop communications, air horns, whistles, etc. When operating equipment, maintain communication until the task is completed. While moving a semi-truck trailer combination using a spotter, the driver temporarily stopped to pick up items that had fallen to the floor of the vehicle. The spotter assumed that the driver had made a final stop and parked the vehicle. He crawled beneath the vehicle to uncouple the trailer and the truck hoses. The driver sat back up, did not see the spotter, and pulled the vehicle forward over the spotter, resulting in a fatality. Never assume that using a spotter makes the situation safe.
Prior to beginning work and as part of the hazard assessment, the spotter and operator should conduct a full walk-around of the equipment. This walk-around provides an opportune time to communicate blind spots or machine-specific requirements. This communication gives the spotter more information to safely guide the operator. Whenever equipment must travel along a route, always plan ahead by inspecting the desired path and minimize the distance of travel, especially when the equipment is in reverse. While two-way radios provide an effective method of communication, they may not always be available, which emphasizes the fact that the spotter and operator must always maintain visual contact with one another. This stands true even when two-way radios are being used. All signals to be used must be clearly understood by the operator, spotter, and the personnel on the construction site.
Let's look at some scenarios requiring spotters. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? What hazards do you see? What are some possible incidents? Spotters should be used in this area. Several pieces of equipment, scissor lifts and aerial lifts are working in the same area. Incidents include contact between equipment, caught by, struck by hazards for personnel when equipment is moving or rotating, and contact with other materials. Do you think spotters should be required in this area? What hazards do you see? What are some possible incidents? Spotters could be used if another craft moves in. These lifts all belong to the same company working in the pipe rack, and they are separated. This is also a manufacturing plant. You can see the product in the area. If plant personnel enter the area with forklifts, spotters are needed to ensure safe distances between equipment is maintained and our client's personnel. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Yes. If forklifts or other equipment are in the area, spotters shall be used. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Absolutely. These covers are inadequate to support construction equipment. A spotter should be used if the equipment must be operated in close proximity to these hole covers. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Not necessarily. These lifts are working near the wall where interference with personnel and other equipment is minimal. Spotters generally would not be required for this work area. The work area would have to be reevaluated if conditions change. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Absolutely. Spotters are needed for this work area. There are several pieces of active equipment in the area, and contact between equipment or personnel is likely without the use of spotters. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Not necessarily. The forklift operator has a full view of the elevated lift. Spotter would generally not be needed unless the conditions change. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Not necessarily. Forklift operator has full view of the elevated lift. The spotter generally would not be needed unless conditions change. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Absolutely. This work area should be barricaded off and no personnel in the area of the lift base. Also, what is on the backside of the aerial lift? A scissor lift. Two pieces of equipment in close proximity is never a good option. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Absolutely. A spotter is required for this operation. Also, the scissor lift should be repositioned parallel with the mezzanine to allow more room for the forklift and reduce possible contact. Do you think a spotter is required for this area? Absolutely. A spotter is required for maneuvering this lift into place. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? Yes. There are no hole covers or indicators that a hole exists. A spotter should be used when moving the aerial lift. Effective communication between the lift operators is essential. Would a spotter be required in this area? No. No spotter is required in this situation. However, the situation must be reevaluated if other equipment and personnel move into the area. Do you think a spotter should be required in this area? And what procedure should you use to move the lift? Yes, a spotter is required. Equipment is in close proximity to each other, and a spotter is necessary to coordinate the movement. Notice the positioning of the equipment. Contact is likely. How would you coordinate equipment movement? The elevated scissor lift should be completely lowered before the elevated lift performs any movement. In this scenario, no spotter is required. The personnel door is barricaded. The lift is stationary and barricaded to prevent unauthorized access into the work area. No spotter is required. In this scenario, a spotter is required. There's multiple pieces of equipment and multiple trades all working in close proximity. Spotters shall coordinate all equipment movement, and each contractor needs to coordinate their movements with the other. Final thoughts. Mobile equipment operators and spotters hold equal responsibility when moving equipment in the work area. Plan the work, assess the hazards, understand the task. Do not assume having a spotter makes the situation safe. This creates a false sense of security. Designate only one person to give signals, except when signaling an emergency stop. Coordination and communication between the spotter and the operator are critical. If there is a change or deviation from the plan, give the stop signal and reevaluate the risk assessment and the precautions to be taken. If the operator stops responding to signals, the task is shut down until the issue is resolved. We appreciate your attention to this program. Spotters have an important role and must be taken seriously. Please contact your supervisor if you have any questions. And always remember, if you have to choose, choose safe.